is approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the agenda is approved. We have no consent items, and we have three non-consent items. And first, we'll have a presentation, and Jim Alexander is here to present. And Jim, if we could go through the presentation then, but pause when you're finished presenting on the individual business items, and then we can go ahead and vote on them. And then also, I don't know if you've had a chance to look at, but the business items were updated. And so there's red line versions, and so we'll be voting on the red line versions.
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. I'm Jim Alexander, Project Director for Southwest LRT. I have a short presentation, and I can take questions as we go for the three business items. I'm going to be talking about the proposed project budget schedule update project Southwest LRT, and these other two pieces are amendments to first cooperative funding agreement with HICRA, and the second is fourth amendment to the CTIP capital grant. So just a little background on where we've been on the project. You may recall back in 2016, actually late in December 2016, we received from the FTA entry in engineering. It was a big milestone for us, and leading into that, we had an updated cost estimate of $1.858 billion, and that was done in August of 2016. And it was based on 90% design plan. So we had a civil package, we had an OMF package, systems package, and those were 90% design complete at that time. And that's what was the basis of our estimate at that point in time of the project. And at that juncture, we were anticipating being in revenue service in 2021, and just kind of update that we are now proposing to be in revenue service in 2023. So that's one item we'll be considering today. And then just a little bit about the 1.858. We submitted that to FTA. As I said, we got the approval in December, and that essentially locks in what the feds are going to do in the project, assuming so that cap, if you will, is $959 million from FTA. So anything increasing on the budget would have to be borne by local sources, and we're essentially counting on that. And we'll talk about that in subsequent slides here. So this is what the kind of the funding source pie chart looks like with the $1.858 billion budget, 50% FTA, 50% local. Of course, that'll change with the new figure that I'll to you today. Wanted to talk a little bit about cost drivers. Since that 90% design stop back in 2016, a lot of things have developed on the project, and we'll talk about that in terms of the major things that are contributing to a new number. So we'll talk about schedule, construction, right-of-way, and project management. So just to start, schedule delays, we've had to deal with freight rail negotiations. As you know, that's currently going on. We essentially have BNSF pretty much understood in terms of what our financial obligations are with the BNSF pieces. We are still finalizing those agreements. After we finish the record, got the amended record decision earlier this month from the FTA on the extension of border protection, all that now we're starting to button up those agreements. But in terms of the business terms, we have those understood, and those are in the number to about $29-30 million that we've talked about in the past. We also have the Canadian Pacific on the Bass Lake Spur. We're purchasing that from Canadian Pacific, and we have that number understood. That's 27.45 for that the purchase of that property. And we also have an agreement set up with the Hanover County Regional Rail Authority to take that property on. And as you know, this we talked earlier that this Bass Lake Spur and the Hanover Corridor are for the STP, the Surface Transportation Board, right now, and we're anxiously waiting to get that concluded with the STP. And so, additional environmental analysis. I mentioned the corridor protection, and that culminated with the record decision that did cause a delay in our civil bid. Recall, back in August, we had one of the civil bids that were rejected at that point in time. And so we went out and bid again for round two. Oh, sorry, can everybody hear me? All right, I'm not coming on that. Okay, thank you. Hopefully I don't have to start again.
You're fine.
No, okay. So we're on to round two, and we did get bids May 2nd, and we had two bidders. Linda McCrossan was the apparent low bidder, and the other Ames Kramer. And the numbers were relatively about the same as what we saw in the round one, which is very interesting because we had expected, frankly, higher bids coming in, given the just the escalation factor and knowing the material costs are kind of going kind of wild out there in terms of steel, in particular, and fuel, and labor is also a challenge. So I'll talk about that here in a little bit. So in terms of the commodity increases, we did see some increases on the diesel fuel from that August point when that round one was coming in the bids to May 3rd, and we see a 17% increase. We also see on raw steel, and that means if I had to place an order on something that hasn't been fabricated, that has to go to the mill and get all graded, we see about a 40% increase. If I see things right off the shelf, that increase isn't so severe, but still quite an increase on the raw steel. And then the labor, very tight market in the area here in particular, with the labor market hovering around the low threes. But in terms of what we did from round one to round two, we allowed more time for the contractor in certain elements of the project, like namely the Excelsior area, and also for the Hanover Tunnel. We also arranged with Three Rivers and the cities to close off the trail that goes between Hopkins and St. Louis Park and ends in Minneapolis. We were able to close that off for a period of time during construction, and did some adjustments to the contractual nature of the contract. And I think what we're seeing is that was really offset with these increases that we were seeing in the market world, and were offset by the things we did on the round two specifications and the contract. And also, the shared corridor protection wall is added into the budget that we're going to present today. On the right-of-way perspective, we've been seeing property values escalating. We were anticipating getting construction some time ago, and so we're late on that. So property values have been going up as we've been moving in time. We've also seen an increase in business relocations. We originally had anticipated, forecasted about 100 relocates, and we're a little over 170. I would say that at this point in time, we had that fairly well understood, and so we feel like we have a better comfort level in terms of what the exposure is on the right-of-way. We have thinking around the 70 parcels that we have title of possession, so that means we know the price, and that's all configured into our budget to understand where that's lying overall. We have 153 parcels, but many of the larger ones have already been identified through a T&E or a title possession. And the relocate, I think that's kind of settled down as well, as in terms of understanding what the number is and what the magnitude of the costs are associated with that. And as we look to move from 2021 to 2023, we need to extend consulting services. We have AECOM lead as an advanced design consultant that will help us through the construction period. They actually provide a lot of effort in terms of design support during construction, a very important piece where we get change orders, we get requests for information, so we need to keep that motor running, so to speak, to keep the contractor keep them on time and on their budget. And we also have to extend agency project staff, including myself, to work on the project. And of course, comes with that, we need a place to work. So the office lease needs to be extended for a couple of years. So those costs are included in this as well. There's another piece, kind of a late breaking. This is the Eaton Prairie Town Center. You may recall back in 2015, where we were looking at some budget increases that we ended up landing with a new configuration where we said Eaton Prairie Town Center would be deferred. So it was always thought of as part of the project, built out eventually. And during that time, the city of Prairie sought out after a CMAQ grant, which they received. And just on last week, May 15, they passed a resolution to include that station into the project, and the city would be responsible for the local cost share. It's a 20% cost share. So a total of $7.7 million is added to the project, and 6.1 from the CMAQ, the remainder from the city contribution. And as we talked to the FTA about this, they say that this 7.7 needs to be included in the overall budget. That's why it's being presented here. But if there's any change orders that are associated with this beginning construction, would be have to be done by the city. So I mentioned a couple of steps that we took to mitigate cost increases. As I indicated, we provided the civil contractor with more flexibility in scheduling construction activities, and we think that that was a big help to them. We also kind of boosted up the mobilization, and we also extended the limited notice to proceed period and the amount. We're currently at we're at 216 million for the full LNTP that would projected to take us into May timeframe of next year. And what we're hearing from the contractors is that they're concerned that they are kind of bankrolling the initial phases of the construction. So we tried to kind of distribute that risk a little bit to give them more flexibility. The other piece that we've been working on with the county, and got a little asterisk here that we still need to work out with the FTA, is that as we have 100% design done on most of the components of the project. And I'll speak to that because it's not quite 100% of all the design yet done. But we are looking to reduce that contingency. It was around 20% in 2016 when we got that entry into engineering from FTA. We're now proposing to draw that down to 14%. And that's typically how you look at these projects where your design is very little understood to a lot of contingency to as you evolve, you get more design understood to the contingency is lower. But we still need contingency as we get into construction. Primarily, we have concerns about all the bridges and the tunnels they're working on this project. So just note that this is subject to FDA approval. We will be getting a package together to them and doing a risk refresh workshop with them later in June. We agreed to a date. We're going to do that mid-June with them. So they'll assess the current health of the project and that 14% to see if that is enough, and they'll come back with a number. And so it could be a possibility that they may want to raise that. We don't know that until we go through that exercise, but we'll see how that plays out over the summer time frame here. And then the other piece that I want to talk about a little bit is reallocation and maintenance and storage functions. So as we looked at the overall cost of the project, as we're looking at all those components I spoke of, we're seeing that we need to still reduce the cost to make it palatable to hopefully get approval from the county. Now the county is voting on this on May 31st, so that's still another piece that we have to go through on this. As mentioned, just in addition to the May 30, while we bring this to full council, assuming it passes here, we would do that at the county on the 31st. So in terms of the storage functions, I'll talk about that a little bit in a subsequent slide, but we're looking to reallocate some of those functions at the existing facilities, the Franklin facility on the blue line, and then the Lower Town facility just at the end of the green line. So in terms of those maintenance functions, we had been looking at a number of scenarios of what we could do at the Hopkins facility, and it really came down to, in order to meet the budget constraints we're trying to meet, is that we're looking at a storage-only facility at Hopkins, and our operations folks said, that really doesn't fully work for us. We'd rather have the vehicles located at Franklin and Lower Town, and to be able to maintain them there if I don't have any maintenance capability in Hopkins. So we have essentially are starting to look at the idea of outfitting the Franklin facility to accommodate more mechanical capacity, and this is really mitigation for what we have currently programmed. As we talked in the past, we had essentially a light maintenance facility in Hopkins, and what we're proposing through this is that would be reduced to a rail support facility. And the rail support facility is about a 25,000 square foot building that would house maintenance folks and as well as equipment that they would use to fix things on the line, so signals, gates, those type of things. And we have one of those facilities on Franklin, but it's not large enough to outfit for the whole system that we have. So we would look to have that as part of the Hopkins site. And the rail support facility was a part of the OMF at one time. Until we just recently had to relook at our scope here. Coupled with that, at the Hopkins site, we're looking to build a pocket track, so if there's a disabled train out in the western part, that consist could be brought in. We're looking at a 2-3 car consist to be located on that site. We also have stormwater ponding needs that we need to resolve, and there's some parking that we'll look to utilize that site as well. Now we still have a bit of work to do, and that's why I said that 100% design. This piece is still going to be something we need to flesh out over the coming months. And we'll be working closely with our operations folks, but also with the city of Hawkins to understand what that site is going to look like. And so, in terms of the maintenance facility, you may recall, some of you, for the Blue Line extension, there was at one time that the Blue Line was contemplating building out some mechanical bays on the Franklin facility. That scope is essentially going to be brought in as mitigation for the Southwest project now that we wouldn't have the maintenance function out in Hopkins. I might pause there since that kind of affects Metro Transit proper, if there are any questions on that.
Councilmember Elkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So what does this do to the footprint of the site in Hopkins and the redevelopment and relocation of businesses in that area?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Elkins, yes, it does change things in terms of what's going to be on the site. I would say that anything we're doing, we're looking to stay within the footprint of what's out there today. And so we know we have some needs. The stormwater in particular needs to be sorted out because we did have a number of ponds on that site. They were kind of configured around the yard track, so it was kind of a tricky piece. So that's going to have to be a need to fulfill. We also see some parking needs. We had, for example, there was 100 stalls that we did not have in the civil package that's at Shady Oak Park and Ride that would likely move over to this location to occupy. In terms of the right-of-way that's out there, there are four buildings, primary buildings that are essentially, 3 of them the folks have been relocated already. There's one at the northern end that is kind of half in, half out, and they're in the process of getting fully out here soon. So we essentially have title and possession of all those parcels. So probably your next question is what happens in the future. That's one thing we want to talk with the city about in terms of what's the best use of this whole parcel of land, if you will, as we look to have 4 parcels turn into one to be owned by the council. And it's a possibility that down the road there might be some remnant property that could be resold. Of course, there's a lot of tails to that. We'd have to work that out with FDA and the county, following their guidelines or their rules that we have under our agreements.
Councilmember Elkins.
I think I understand. So most of the land has already been acquired and the business is relocated. So if we actually end up needing a much smaller footprint, it could create additional redevelopment opportunities with some agreement with the city of Hopkins.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Elkins, that's true. We're looking to work with the city. I would say that these components are going to take up quite a bit of space on the property, but we're still kind of noodling that out, so to speak. So that's more information to come along as we move on.
Councilmember Munt.
Madam Chair, Jim, job creation was important to Hopkins at the OMF. How many jobs will be created at a rail support facility?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Munt, we project in the neighborhood of about 70, maybe a little 70 to 80 workers that would be there. For comparison, the OMF was anywhere from about a high 160 to 180 or so in that range. So it is a reduction. That's why we want to work closely with the city. We know that this was no one really wanted the OMF back in the day, and so we're going to try to work closely with them and see what we can work out here.
Councilmember Reynoso and then Councilmember Carnahan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jim, I looked at the presentation beforehand and didn't see anything about labor costs increasing. We expect no labor increase costs over a year.
So I do have, Madam Chair, Councilmember, I do have a slide I thought back here. So we see we don't have it really broken down in costs because there's so many different rates that we look at. But if we're tracking unemployment rate, we were at 3.4 back in August. We're at 3.2, so relatively steady but tight. And we know that labor has been an issue for the contracting community. And so it's really difficult to tell from because we have a lump sum bid. We don't have necessarily all broken out to fully understand what that labor cost is. But I would say that we are probably seeing the same challenges we had back in August that we did in May in terms of getting labor to work on this project.
Which, thank you, Madam Chair. And so normally, Jim, it would mean it would more demand for less workers available would raise the price normally, correct?
Madam Chair, Councilmember, that is correct. Yes, it definitely would go up. But as I indicate, since the unemployment rate, and this is just overall metro, not necessarily construction workers, but the overall metro stayed at kind of a steady line. Likely, probably not much of an increase between August and May. That's my speculation, just based on the numbers we're seeing.
Thank you.
Councilmember Cunningham.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You're on the right slide here, and the question I have on the cost drivers, it's not clear to me which one of these drivers are more significant, less significant. Are they all equal? So are they in some kind of priority order as you have them listed here? Sure. So I'm not clear on what's actually driving this, or is it all the same?
Sure. Madam Chair, Councilmember Cunningham, I would say that this wasn't intended to be kind of a hierarchy these are examples. I would say in terms of the steel, about a third of the materials on the contract for civil contract is made up of steel of some sort, rebar, steel for bridges. So it does make up a large component. The fuel prices, that's one thing that's really kind of hard to track, because we'll have a lot of earth movement throughout the whole project in terms of moving soils. So it wasn't really intended to be a hierarchy. What's worse? These are just two of the commodities that are kind of on the top tier, if you will, of all the commodities we look at. As we look at the systems later on, copper is really the market culprit, if you will, that we want to watch really closely. That in labor.
Madam Chair, if I could just follow that up. When we had put out the bids before, and we got some letters back from a number of folks that were not happy with the fact that we rebid this project, they raised the question of the steel costs going up because of hurricanes, et cetera, et cetera. Are you saying that what they said at that time actually came to pass, given the bids that we got, that we opened, and what we have in front of us?
Sure, Madam Chair, Councilmember Cunningham. Again, it's a little difficult to say. It's my interpretation that given the bids were relatively close, you may recall back in August, James Kramer had the low bid of about $797, I think, and London McCrossin was about $814. Now we're looking at $799 and $812. So they're pretty close. They just kind of flip-flopped between the two. But that, coupled with the things we did, which were frankly kind of hard to quantify, like the adding more time for Excelsior Bridge, for example, we gave the contractor more time because that's one of the things we heard, that we're constrained by you need to have this done so quickly. But when we do that, we have to account for escalation. So in our calculations, we have to figure out, and so that kind of goes contrary to that kind of relieving of risk, if you will. So it's many factors. I guess my point is there's many factors going into a bid, and very complex, particularly this type of project with the many bridges we have and the tunnels. It's just it's really kind of hard to speculate without really kind of sitting down with the contractor and fully understanding their methodologies as they put the bid together.
Councilmember Reynoso.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And last question, Jim. I suspect, looking at the increase of steel prices, there's probably a correlation with the steel tariffs that have been created by the Trump administration. Is that safe to say?
Well, Madam Chair, Councilmember, one of the things we did regarding the steel, we were concerned about that as well, and we actually had a question before the bids came in from the bidders and prospective bidders anyway, that they were concerned about. Okay, we're gonna get this bid in May, and you're not going to award until August. There's what's going on in the world market. What's going to happen? So what we did is we essentially fixed an index to April of the steel price. So if it went up 10% beyond that or 10% below it, we would adjust that by a change order. So we think that that may have kind of helped relieve that stress a little bit from the contractor's perspective. It does pose a little bit of risk on our end in terms of now we're subject to an increase possibility, but we felt like that was kind of a mutual trying to meet the contractor halfway on the risk level. So it was something that was kind of front and center as we were moving into the bid time with that activity from the president.
Are there further questions? Chair Chavez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jim, you might recall, feels like light years ago by now, but I'd raised a question about steel pricing indexing and wondering if we still have the opportunity for the project to do any type of hedging on that, either for the benefit of the contractors or not, or I don't know what. I'm just trying to be creative.
Sure.
Likewise with the diesel fuel, wondering, we talk about it at management, I think quarterly at least, as far as the diesel fuel price hedging, if there's a way to legally collaborate with the users of that diesel fuel to manage our own costs, to say, hey, you're going out there with your earth moving equipment, we can provide you the diesel fuel at our cost. There may be all kinds of 14 different government regulations on that. But without knowing those, I'd be curious to say, again, ways to be creative to mitigate our expenses. So just food for thought for the future. There's no specific answer right now.
Sure. Thank you. All right. So let's see where I was here. Okay, so that brings us to where we are today, and we're proposing a new project budget of $2.003 billion, and that represents just about an 8% increase, or $145 million over that 2016 number. And this requires more commitment from the county and HICRA, which I indicated we're going to be before those boards later next week. And also, it revises the project schedule to 2023 for the new service. So just a little more detail, and this is in the business item, kind of a lot of information, but most of this I've covered. In terms of if we split this up between the construction right away, LRVs, frankly, haven't changed. And that 126, you're wondering why that dropped down. That was developed before we had a contract with Siemens, and now we have a contract with Siemens, so that's understood. And the project management has gone up as well. But one thing I want to point out that as we look at all the contracts for this project, we have about 80% in hand in terms of what we know the number is now that the civil bid has come in. So we feel like we're in a much better position than we were in 2016 to understand what these project costs are. Obviously, hide from the fact that we've been before you and before the county with budget increases, and we'll work our best to keep them contained as much as possible. But just that fact alone, having 80% in hand is a big thing, and having that civil bid at $800 million, that's a big thing for this project to have those dollars understood. So with the configuration of the funding with that 2.003, this is the split out, if you will. So we're looking now at 46% from the FTA, and the 54% would be made up by the local. And you see CTIB here. I do have another business item. I'm wondering why CTIB is still here. The county essentially taken over the CTIB, but eventually those dollars will be exhausted, and we'll get a new grant through the county. And this also does include down the lower right there, the Eaton Prairie Town Center station is included. One other thing that I did bypass, I should mention, getting into right away, is that as we looked at our overall budget, we had in-kind land. I don't know if you recall the in-kind land value that was contributed mainly by the county, but there was also some small components by the cities, and all to the tune of about $69 million. So as we've been working with the county to up with this budget that we'll submit to the Federal Transit Administration, we said that we're going to remove that value on the county piece to lower the overall budget amount. Now, what that means is the county has to contribute more money on their local ledger, but essentially brings that overall budget down. We originally had there, if you recall, we were a 50% share with FTA. It really benefited that we had that value, because essentially created cash, if you will, on the federal side. But now that we're 46, 54 percent divvying up between the two entities, we don't necessarily need that for the overall budget. So I've got a kind of a dynamic slide here talking about the distribution. So as we looked at 2016 versus 2018, the numbers, the FTA, again, it does stay constant. We are locked into that. That's a typical thing. Once you get entry and engineering, you have that in place. CTIB does rise a little bit. That increase is really due to some monies they're actually earning through interest. And Hanover County does raise from just under 400 to 581, and then the HICRA increases just under 200. And then we have the other pieces, the in-kind land, 69 million. Now there's still a smidgen, if you will, of in-kind land from the city's contribution there, and then of course Eden Prairie Town Center Station of the 7.7. And then we also have some monies. These are monies we've had in there kind of all along that relate more to the trails. You may recall we have a tunnel under Blake Road for the pedestrian tunnel or pedestrian trail. We also have a tunnel at Wooddale in St. Louis Park, and also a bridge at Beltline. So a lot of these monies were some things identified earlier in the project that are being funded by these local entities, the county and the cities. And then of course the state stays constant as well at 30 million. So in terms of contingency, we are looking again going from that 20% that we had back in the entry and engineering to a proposal of 14%. And again, just need to stress that this does need to go through the FTA mill. We need to run this to ground with them to make sure that this is gonna stand. So they will have the final say on what this contingency value is. And there's a possibility that they may say 14 is not enough. It may need to be 15, maybe even 16. We don't know that yet, but that's something we'll be working with FTA over the summer timeframe. So the other piece that's very important in terms of project controls is so we have an executive change control board. Now this is something that's not new to our environment. We had something like this from CTIB. As the county's taking over more of the local share, we've been working with them to come up with new parameters, if you will, that are similar to what we had. But I guess the big change here is that change orders that would be required to come through on the civil contract. So change orders over 350,000 need to go through this executive change control board. Now this board is going to be made up of three county policymakers, and they'll have the chair from the Met Council will be the chair of BCCB, and then we also have another council member that would be part of that change control board. And then in addition to that, we thought since this is an extension really of the Green Line, that it made sense to have a representative from Ramsey County. So Ramsey County will have a vote, but they will be at the table to hear about these change orders. So this is something where we will have regular meetings with this board to cover any changes that come about from the civil contract, systems contract. So next steps in terms of where we're heading here, we've already been before the Hanover County Commissioners. We had a briefing on the 17th. Hanover County staff gave that. Mark Furman and I were there on hand for questions, and then there was a board meetings on the 22nd, and that culminates in a special meeting on the 31st, as I mentioned, to weigh in on this new budget and the new schedule. In terms of the Met Council, we are here today with the joint meeting, and then we are going to be at the council at a special meeting on the 30th next week. And then we're also going before the Quarter Management Committee on Thursday and Business Advisory Committee next week to give them an update, essentially a similar presentation of what we have here. So just some milestones to kind of let you know where we're heading here. We just finished an application for a letter of no prejudice to send that to the FTA on Friday last week. That's an important thing because we need to have that in place. We need to have a LNP in place from the feds before we award the contract, and the county will weigh in on that as well. And so I have a couple of slides to talk about that, but assuming that happens, then we would look to it happens in July, we'll look to award the contract to Linda McCrossin in August, and then we give a limited notice to proceed to take us into May currently programmed May of next year for limited notice to proceed work. And we would be applying for the full funding grant agreement later this summer with the anticipation of getting that FFGA later in next year. And so I do have a couple of slides on the L&P. This is just a federal policy, so you may recall on Central we did this quite a bit, I think up to 9 times, where we essentially we didn't have that FFGA in place, so we had to look to the locals to spend dollars really at risk until that full funding grant agreement comes into play. And what it does allow, it gives the authority that we can spend monies knowing that once we get the FFGA that we'll get the cost share from FTA. So without that, we wouldn't necessarily have that cost share from FTA. So this is an important piece that we need to take underway. So we submitted that request on Friday, total 187.3 million. Now this compares with the limited notice to proceed and the civil contract that we have is 216 million. And the delta there is related to what we call pre-award items. So working on long lead items, working on utility related items. So those aren't necessarily made up of the 50-some million, isn't part of that element P, but it's part of the limited notice to proceed. And it's really just talking about mobilization and getting work underway. So we're still having some correspondence with the low bidder on exactly what work they anticipate doing. But as we get things mapped out, there's certainly mobilization. And as you know, we have 29 bridges on this project, so there's going to be a lot of work on bridges. So I list these here. Mainly LRT. There are some roadway bridges, Glenwood, for example. And we have the Hanover Tunnel in there. We also have the Southwest Station. There's a lot of activity that needs to take place down there. And then the freight rail track work primarily around Excelsior and around the Kenilworth Tunnel and then the tunnel itself. So quite a bit of activity that's going to be kind of spread out throughout. And we're looking to get more definition on that. We met with our technical project advisory committee earlier this week, and I committed to them to try to get some more definition in terms of what exactly is going to be happening in the fall timeframe for the civil contract. So here's just kind of a snapshot of the overall project schedule, again taking us into 2023. And I think maybe I'll just pause here after this. We're looking for a recommendation to approve the new budget of $2.03 billion and to acknowledge the 2023 revenue service. And Madam Chair, do you want to go on to the next slides, or shall I pause here for a moment?
Yeah, let's pause here for questions, and then we'll take the business items one at a time. So we'll after discussion, we can have this business item voted on. Councilmember Watt.
Madam Chair, Jim, I'm trying to understand if the cost increase is 145 million, why is Hennepin on the hook for an additional 204 million?
Yes, Madam Chair, Councilmember Munt, it has to do with that in-kind value, so they're going to have to contribute more. Because again, that was kind of a placeholder, if you will, on the local side back when we were a 50% share. So it really was a mechanism to draw the overall budget down. Okay. So the county agreed that they would, hopefully they're going to agree that they're going to take that on. So that's really where the delta is.
And Jim, can I clarify that just a bit? It actually isn't more. It's the same. It would, if we had kept the in-kind land donation in, it still would have been the 204 million more that they would have needed to contribute. It's just that when you do in-kind land, it goes in on the revenue side and the expense side. So when you take it out, that's why the budget looks like it, and it is less. But it's the accounting. That's how in-kind land donation works. So it would have been, if we had kept it in, it still would have been an additional need for $200 million to finance the project.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Councilmember Cunningham.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm signaling that I'm going to vote for this today, but I do have a couple questions. And the first is on that 14% of the contingency that's being held that you're recommending. When you look across projects across the country, what is the normal or average contingency kept for these projects? And have the FTA ever accepted 14% in any project across the country as a contingency?
Sure, Madam Chair, Councilmember Cunningham. I can probably speak a little bit. I might have to have Mark come up here and fill it out a little bit, but generally, as we understand, again, the 80% number is pretty significant. We we see that range 14 is probably not too far off. It might need to be bumped up to about 15, maybe. It really depends on how the FTA looks at the overall risks that we have outstanding on the project. The fact that we have a lot of the freight rail understood already. That's a big thing. The fact that we have design in play, the fact that we have a civil bid and number, and the bids have been cleared. We just need to get that LONP. And what's really remaining is the systems piece. We got the LRVs in hand already. We actually have a lot in hand, just haven't necessarily gotten constructed. And I think the rates vary. I might ask Mark to step up here in terms of what other projects are experiencing.
Thanks, Jim. Madam Chair, Councilmember Cunningham, yes, I try to monitor those pure projects, and what we see is pretty typical of 14 to 16% contingency range. In fact, I talked to the Caltrain people, who are the most recent recipient of an FFGA last year, and their contingency rate is, when they got their full funding grant, was 15.3%. So that's the range. There's no formulaic as to what exactly it is. It's based on the project's risk profile. And so that's what FTA is going to do this summer and come back with their recommended contingency.
Well, Madam Chair,
Councilmember Cunningham.
so the possibility of us coming back to the table with a further increase is there based on whatever FTA says what the contingency could be. I just want to make it clear that this might come back to us at some point if FTA indicates that we need a higher contingency. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, Councilmember, yes, I think it's just important for everyone to realize that we still need to, and this is how the process works. We need to go through. We've done a risk assessment with FTA back in December of 2016. We need to do a risk refresh based on what the project is understood now, and to update that, and then the FTA will deliberate to determine what that ultimate contingency amount, as well as the drawdown curve. We have a suggested drawdown curve that we'll give to them, but we need to understand what they say, because that's really what dictates where we're going to move forward on this project.
And Madam Chair, just one
Yes.
other question.
Councilmember Cunningham.
And Jim, you've done a great job, and staff is on this project throughout, so that's my belief about it. But I just want to ask the question from your professional standpoint. Are there other risk areas out there for this project that are going to, beyond this contingency piece, that are going to increase this project more by 3 to 5%, in your opinion, over the life of the project?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Cunningham, the way I look at it is we're going into civil construction, and there's always unknowns in terms of when every time you dig into the ground, you're going to, especially we have 2 tunnels. We have one under 62 and one in the Kenilworth corridor. But I feel like we have enough understood in terms of the investigations we've done, but you're always going to encounter something. But that's really what that contingency we have earmarked that would be taking place for that. Again, I feel today that I keep on going back to the 80% number is slightly over in terms of what we understand in terms of numbers. We have a lot under our belt in terms of what the costs are going to be on this project. Certainly, I won't be in terms of freight rail. There's still the STB action, and in terms of how long that takes, that's yet to be seen. But I think those are moving along well, and I think that we're in a pretty good spot with our number in terms of what we know today.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are there further questions? Councilmember Munt.
Madam Chair, Jim, with this timeline, are we talking about a groundbreaking late summer, early fall of this year?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Munt, it's our projection that assuming we get the LONP in place, and that means the FDA is okay, then the county needs to weigh in on that, and then we can award the contract. We're looking at giving a limited notice to proceed sometime in the early September, late August timeframe, and typically it takes a little while before the contractor is going to start doing, because there's a lot of paperwork, submittals that need to be handed, but there's going to start to be activity later on in the fall as we move on this year here.
Further questions? Councilmember Schreiber.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This isn't a question, it's a comment. I was reading the narrative that our full committee will read, and most of us, but I'm not always there, get all the acronyms. And so I would just, you've done a good job in this narrative, spelling out some of these acronyms. And in my experience, the Transportation Committee is the mother lode of acronyms. And so think about that when the full committee reads your text. And you've done a good job here. I scanned it quickly. The rest of the committee, it'll just kind of, you get so used to your work and that's how you can narrow your conversations and your writing. But I want to thank you. You did a good job on this one.
Any further comments or questions?
Madam Chair, I did have one other
Councilmember
question,
Cunningham?
not to belabor the points. You mentioned this committee that would be the county and Metropolitan Council and the configuration of that. And I'm just trying to figure, I hadn't heard of that. I'm not on the Transportation Committee. So could you give me a little bit more background on that? Because I'm just wondering about the composition of that committee and how that got decided.
Sure, Madam Chair, Councilmember Cunningham. It's really kind of modeled after an existing ECCB that we had with CTIP that was made up of policy makers, and so we've kind of transformed that into what would be now made up of 3 elected officials from the county and two council members. The chair being from the council, being the chair of the ECCB, that Executive Change Control Board. And again, the Ramsey County representative would be a non-voting member, but given that we're extension of the Green Line, that entity would be on that board as well. So what we do is we would meet on a regular basis as these change orders come up, and hopefully there'll be few, but if there's change orders over $350,000, we would have to get approval from that board to move forward with the contractor. Now, there will also be review of essentially all the change orders. We'll be presenting kind of a review of any change orders from $5 up to $349,000, so they can review that, as well as other contracts that are coming up, so to keep them aware of where we're at with the project. It's really just it's kind of a smart thing. It's something that allows us to control our costs, and we have internal functions that lead up to this within the SPO, the Southwest Project Office. We have technical entities looking at these change orders all the time. We evaluate, well, does this have merit, no merit, and then it gets evolved into deciding if it's going to be a go or no go. And of course, if it goes up to that 350 value, it needs to go to that ECCB. Does that help?
That was very helpful. That was a deeper explanation, and I appreciate that. And it sounds like there has been some discussions at the staff level and at the executive level here to agree to that relationship. And I'm just wondering if the Transportation Committee had approved that prior to this meeting, or is that just being approved as part of this package today?
Madam Chair, Councilmember, this is really kind of a new thing for the configuration. It is an existing concept that I'm sure we brought to the Transportation Committee in the past when it was under CTIP. I just don't recall the details on that, but for this, it's really part of the package, if you will, I guess, in terms of our new budget and our new schedule. It's something the county will be considering as well as we present to them next week.
And Madam Chair, not to belabor, I'm just wondering, was the configuration, meaning the representation, the same as what's going on with this change to Hennepin County, or is it change, meaning the representatives from the council, et cetera? I'm just wondering if the proportions were the same or different.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Cunningham, under the CTIP umbrella, it was different because we had various counties that were part of CTIP, part of that. So we had Washington County, for example. It still had the council chair as the chair of that board, but it was a different configuration. I think there were 2 Hennepin County members on. I can't remember Washington and.
Madam Chair and Councilmember Cunningham, the CTIB ECCB composition was 2 county commissioners, 1 county commissioner from the other 4 CTIB member counties, and then the council chair served as the chair of the ECCB. So composition has changed a little bit now going forward with Southwest.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councilmember Munt.
Madam Chair, I'd just like to compliment staff and our partners. I think we've done a good job revising the project budget so that we've found cost savings without sacrificing the benefits that this light rail line will have to the public.
Thank you. Are there further comments or questions? I would also like to piggyback on Councilmember Munt's comments. I thank staff. I have done so much work on this project. It's been a long time coming, and these are big and important projects, and they should be thoroughly vetted. And this one certainly has been. But not only SBO staff, but also our staff, our Robert Street staff. So thank you very much, and Hennepin County staff, and their commissioners, especially Commissioners McLaughlin and Callison. I think that the partnership that we've formed with Hennepin County has looked at this and tried to find cost savings and done it in a way that we're still going to produce a really good and a critical line for our region. So with that, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And we can move on to the next two business items and presentation.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. This item is the third amendment to the cooperative funding agreement with Hennepin County Regional Rail Authority. And what this is a request to extend the funding agreement to August 31, 2018 with HICRA and increase amount of $4.2 million to bring the total up to the $67,489,145. And also includes to further clarify roles and responsibilities regarding the use of contingency, so that's where the ECCD is in place, liability insurance in the corridor, financing, federal grant reimbursements, costs associated with unlikely event of the project shutdown, and procedures for collaborative decision-making. You may recall that when we presented the current amendment, number 2, it had this last clause, this further clarifying roles and responsibilities. So this is just an extension to carry that forward with the added piece of the contingency and the collaborative decision making that we've incorporated in here. So, Madam Chair, this is 2018-128 for your consideration.
Are there questions? If not, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
There's moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. 2018-129.
All right, Madam Chair, this last item, the fourth amendment to the 2017 CTIB grant agreement. This would authorize regional administrator to negotiate and execute, looks like I have a double type there, fourth amendment to the 2017 CTIB capital grant agreement for the Southwest LRT to extend again to the August 31 timeframe and to increase it by $4.4 million to a total of $184,266,258, and also to further clarify roles and responsibilities regarding use of contingency, liability, and insurance in the corridor, financing, federal grant reimbursements, and costs associated with the unlikely event of a project shutdown, and procedures for collaborative decision making. And I would just mention that it's intended, as we've been talking with the county, that we would probably look to exhaust this particular grant and move into a county grant moving beyond August 31. And right now, the idea is probably possibly taking that to us to the May timeframe, 2019, kind of corresponding with that limited notice to proceed timeframe.
Are there any questions? Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Madam Chair, council members.
If we don't have any further business or announcements, we can be adjourned and on to Management Committee.